Chapter 5. When I took the children to the guest house, Roland said, "This looks like TV," and I asked, "You mean like a television show? Like a kid's show?" "We don't have television," Bessie said. "Mom won't let us watch television." "But we can watch it now," Roland asked, and it was just drawing on him. "Oh, yes," I said. "I imagined that we'd watch a lot of television, or I had before I actually met the kids." Now I felt like Bugs Bunny wouldn't hit Daffy Duck with a hammer, and Bessie and Roland would burst into flames. "Well, with some regulations," I continued, "only a little bit a day, the kids still wouldn't go in. The doors was open, but it was like they were vampires and had to be invited in. Or maybe the house was so pristine, so colorful, that they were afraid of destroying it immediately with what was inside them." "Are you worried about something?" I asked. "No," Bessie said, irritated. "We're just thinking." "About what?" I asked. "Their mother," I figured. "Their father, maybe." "None of your business," she said. "Their mother," I figured. I wanted to learn more about her mother from people who had actually been raised by her instead of Madison's vague aside. But I also wanted to know a single thing about her because it would make me compare myself to her every time the children set their bedsheets on fire. Finally, Bessie Rollins stepped into the house. "Oh, wow," Rollins said, testing the sponginess of the floor. "This is cool." "Isn't it?" I said, letting my feet softly sink into the material. "And look at all those cereals," Bessie and Rollins said, pointing to a pyramid of individual boxes of sugary cereals. And I understood his excitement. Having lived a childhood where the cereal was off-brand, giant plastic bags were 20% pulverized corn or wheat. But Bessie was walking up to a tall bookcase filled with every Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys book in existence. Lots of Judy Blume with Mark Twain and all manners of fairy tales. "These are for us?" she asked. "Yeah," I told her. "I can read you any book you want." "We can read," Bessie said, her face reddening at the idea that I might have thought she couldn't. "We read all the time." "That's all we do is read," Roland said, but Pop and Gran didn't have any books for kids. It was so boring. "What do they have?" I asked. "Books about World War II, Bessie answered. 2 different books about Hitler. Wait, 4 books about Hitler, and another book about Nazis. And books about Stalin, Patton, people like that." "That sounds awful," I told her. "It sucks," Bessie said. "Well, you can read all these books now," I told her. "I read a lot of these already," Bessie said, inspecting the spines, "but some look pretty good." "That's great, and we can get more. We can go to the library and get whatever you want." "Okay," she said, nodding her approval. She looked at me. "And you can read us a book at night if you want to. We'll let you read us a book before we go to bed." "That's great," I said, and I could feel our lives normalizing, a kind of routine for me. "Do you want to put some clothes on?" she asked me, and I realized that I was still in my underwear. Shoot, yes, I do want to put some clothes on, I told her, but I was afraid to leave them alone. As if she read my mind, Bessie said, "You can go change. We're okay. We're really okay right now." I nodded, and then I was running up to the second floor, counting the seconds, afraid that if I was gone longer than a few, I'd come back to find them digging a tunnel to freedom. I pulled on some jeans, slipped into a t-shirt, and ran back downstairs in less than 45 seconds. And they were still there, Bessie making a stack of books that she wanted to read, and Roland sitting on the counter, wrist deep into a box of Apple Jacks. Bessie opened up one of the new books and smiled. The pages Roland smiled at me, and his mouth looked unspeakable, all the little bits of cereal like glitter in his teeth. "This was how you do it, how you raise children. You built them a little house that was impervious to danger, and you gave them every single thing that they could ever want, no matter how impossible. Read to them at night. Why couldn't people figure this out? And then I realized they were still in their smoky clothes, from the fire in the driveway, and I felt like a slob and an idiot, and I had no idea how to keep them alive. This was the wave of childcare, I suppose, real highs and lows. My mom had once told me about that being a mother was made of regret and not then forgetting about that regret sometimes. But I wouldn't be my mother. How many times had I told myself that how unnecessary had it always been. There were no regrets for me and these fire kids, not yet. I whistled to get their attention, and both kids slowly turned in my direction. Let's get you dressed, I asked. And then we need to talk about some stuff. Sad stuff, Roland said, and they were the same age, but Roland seemed younger, having the benefit of growing up with a sister who could bite the shit out of people's hands in order to protect him. No, I said, slightly confused. Not sad stuff, just normal, everyday stuff. We're going to be together all the time. We just need to talk about stuff. Okay, Roland said. I realized that the cereal box he was wearing as a glove was no longer Apple Jacks and was now Cocoa Krispies. Go easy on the cereal, Roland, I kind of asked and kind of demanded. I need to get better about that, be more sure of myself. Roland shoved the last handful of cereal into his mouth, the pieces scattering across the counter and onto the floor. Then he stopped, chewed what he had in his mouth, and hopped off the counter and ran over to me. Bessie stood, and we all went to the rear room, which was, I guess, all balloon-themed. There were framed posters of hot air balloons, crazy colors like flags, to countries that existed in made-up worlds. The knobs on the posters of their beds were designed to look like red balloons. This is a lot of color, Bessie said. It's kind of too much. It is a bit much, I said, but you'll get used to it. Bessie looked at me. Duh. They were children who caught on fire. Their mother had died. They understood how to adjust to weird stuff. There were a lot of choices as far as clothing went, and they both picked up these black and gold Vanderbilt t-shirts and black cotton shorts. I wrapped up their old clothes and tossed them in the trash. How many clothes would these kids go through? Was it better to just let them run out around the house naked? Okay, so let's talk. And I said, the kids sat on their beds. I sat on the floor, and I pulled my knees up to my chin, unsure how to proceed. I had so much time to prepare for these moments, but I spent it playing basketball and eating bacon sandwiches in bed. There had been a folder from some private doctor who examined the children, but it was so boring and nothing was actually resolved, so I just kind of skimmed it. I wished Carl were here because he always had a plan, and then I hated myself for it. So the fire stuff, I said, and both kids had looked on their face like the shit. Again, ho-hum. You guys catch on fire, I said, and so you know that's a problem. I know, it's not your fault, but sometimes we have to deal with it, so maybe we can try and figure it out. There was no cure for it, Bessie said, and I asked, who told you that? We just know, Roland said. Our mom said we'll always be like this. Okay, I continued, a little annoyed with their dead mom for being so negative about it. But what do you know about it? How does it work? It just happens sometimes, Bessie said. It's like sneezing, you know. This tingling feeling comes and goes. But is it when you're upset? Does it ever happen when you're just bored? I wished I had a notebook, a lab coat, something to make this more official, like I was doing intake on a school project. If we get upset, or if we get freaked out, or something bad happens, Roland said, we catch on fire. Or if we had a bad dream, Bessie offered, like a really bad dream. Wait, it happens when you're sleeping even? I asked, and felt the floor beneath me give away a little, then realizing that this might be worse than I thought. Both kids nodded, but only like really bad dreams, Roland said, and if this would comfort me. As if this would comfort me. But mostly when you get upset, I asked, and they nodded again. I don't know if this was progress, but they were listening to me. They weren't on fire. They were together in this house, and everyone outside of the house was waiting for us to figure this out. So we just stay calm, I told them. We read books, and we swim in the pool, and we go for walks, and we just stay calm. We'll still catch on fire, Bessie said, and she looked so sad. But not as much, right? Like today? You're not always catching on fire, I asked. No, not much. Not all that much. More since Mom died, Bessie offered. What would your mom do to keep you guys from catching on fire, I asked. Push us into the shower, Bessie said, seeming to think of this as an unjust squeaky shoe and damp underwear. She made us get up real early every morning, no matter what, Roland said. She said it was better when we were a little tired. And she made us do a ton of chores and lessons, all these lessons with pencil and paper. And she would fill us up the tub with ice and cold water whenever, and we'd get in it. She kept the house real cold, Bessie said, even in the winter. But she looked away, embarrassed. But what? I asked. But I don't think that it really helped, she finally said, the whole time looking at Roland like they had held a secret. It didn't matter if we were hot or cold. When things are okay, it doesn't matter if we're around a fire, like on the stove, but Mom thought it would make us think about fire and when it would happen, and then it would happen. But it's not like that. Really not. It doesn't matter, except when we start to catch on fire. And can you stop yourself? I asked. Sometimes, Bessie admitted. If Mom was around, she'd see it happen, and she'd get so freaked out and try to make us stop. But that would make it worse, Bessie. But if Roland and I are by ourselves and feel it happen, sometimes we just make our minds go blank, and it stops. Sometimes. Okay, I said. I'd crack some spy code and was going to win $1 million. So we'll watch for it and then try to help you calm down. What's all that, Roland asked, pointing to a sprinkler system, which brought me back to reality. That's in case of a fire, I told him, for emergencies. Mom got rid of smoke alarms, Roland said. They went off too much. Well, I said, thinking, the sprinklers are there to keep us safe. The fire doesn't hurt us, Bessie said. Well, I realized it was to keep me safe. It was to keep the house safe. It was to keep the house where Madison and Jasper and Timothy lived safe. I thought of a little smoke and sprinklers going off, everything soaking wet, and the electronics and books ruined. I thought about that happening once or twice a day. Maybe I can get Carl to turn them off, I offered, and the kids seemed happy with that possibility. And then, as if by magic, or perhaps possibility of constant intrusive surveillance, Carl's voice echoed through the house. Hello, he asked. He was downstairs, and I imagined him holding a fire extinguisher like a hero in a bad movie. That's Carl, I said, and the kids nodded. He was a real square, Bessie said, and I wanted to hug her so tightly. Who is he? Roland asked. Is he your boyfriend? God, no, I almost said, laughing. He's like my manager, or no, maybe we're like co-workers with different responsibilities, or Lillian, Carl now shouted. I was kind of forgotten that he was there. Yeah, I shouted back. Everything okay? He asked. Everything is fine, I said. Could you come downstairs? He asked. Us too? Roland shouted. No, Carl shouted, but then he corrected himself. You guys just stay up there for a second while I talk to Lillian. Do you want us to come with you? Bessie asked. I had a hard time looking at her and not seeing waves of flame intruding from her skin. I simply shook my head. I'm okay, I said. As I walked out of the room, I peeked my head back and said, if you feel it coming, run to the shower and turn it on, okay? The kids nodded, and I felt like this was a kind of test to let them out of my sight, to feel them above me, to hear them breathing downstairs. Downstairs, Carl was on his knees, sweeping the cereal crumbs with a dainty little broom and dustpan. He looked up at me. Seems like they're settling in, he said, and I felt a little judged. They haven't caught on fire again, I told him, a little proud of myself. We'll see how long that lasts, he replied. You heard Jasper, right? I asked him. This is happening. You're not getting rid of them. So, Carl asked. So help me, okay? I will help you, Lillian, he said. I will help you make the right decisions. For instance, I said, ignoring the little way he dug into me, you have to turn off the sprinklers. We have to turn off the sprinkler system. It was $2 grand to install that system, Carl replied, like it was his own fucking money, like Timothy's stuffed animal budget wasn't 4 times that amount. How much did all the electronics cost, I asked. How about the books, the clothes, the bed sheets? Those kids caught on fire twice in a single day, right? This house would be like a constant rainstorm if you keep the sprinkler system on. So I'll turn off the system, he said, and then what happens when they catch on fire again? Carl, please. I'll put them out. 24 hours a day. What about when you're asleep? 24/7. I'm a light sleeper. I have a plan. Okay? All right, Carl said. I think maybe we now have a sense of powerful I was. The children were mine, and that gave me something he didn't have. All right, I'll shut it off. But that's our secret. Senator Roberts needs to think that there are true safety measures in place. I'm not going to tell Jasper. Holy shit, do you think I would tell Jasper? Carl looked at me with some measure of sincerity. His posture changed, just the slightest slacking. Lillian, honestly, I don't know what you will or won't, but my livelihood is now connected to yours, so we work together. Agreed? That's great, Carl, I said, kind of meaning it and kind of making fun of him. I'd like that. Now, the reason I came over here was to say that Mrs. Roberts thinks that perhaps having a family dinner might be too overwhelming for the children, not only Roland and Bessie, but also Timothy. Okay, I said, so this was how it was going to work. A line demarching us and them. I wondered if Jasper would ever see the kids again. I wondered if Madison and I would still hang out. And I figured that we would still hang out, but in different ways. You'll be okay making them dinner here? Carl asked. Sure, no problem, but I was quite sure of the merchants of it. I'm used to microwaving something and eating it over the trash can, and over the last week or so, I'd gotten used to Mary making the most amazing meals, and I couldn't stop eating. I would miss Mary so much now that I was fully banished to the guest house. I wanted the children to meet her. All right, then, he said. He turned, but suddenly turned back. Do you see that phone, he asked, pointing to the wall-mounted handset next to the refrigerator. I nodded. If you ever need me, no matter what time it is, or what it's about, pick up that phone and push 1111, okay? 1111, I repeated, and you'll come to me. I will, he said. This seemed to pain him to admit. Good night, Carl, I said. Good night, Lillian, he replied, and he turned into a shadow and was gone. When I went to the stairs, I saw Bessie and Roland sitting on top step, not one bit ashamed of eavesdropping, which I loved. How did it go? How did I do? I asked them. You got him to turn off the sprinklers, Roland said. That's awesome. I did, I said. I told you I would, and then I did. Okay, Bessie said, as if she'd made a decision that she'd been considering ever since she first saw me. Do you want pizza? I asked, and they both nodded, ever enthusiastically. So we went down to the kitchen, and I got the oven on and a frozen pizza shoved in there. I cut up some apples, their skin red and waxy like a fairy tale, and the kids just destroyed the slices, so I cut up 2 more. I ate a banana. I looked again in the fridge and realized there was no beer, and I almost picked up the phone and dialed 1111, but decided to be responsible. I'd steal some from the mansion tomorrow, or maybe some of Jasper's fancy bourbon, which I believed I'd earned with my work here today. My hand was kind of throbbing, which made me feel a little less proud of myself, and so I took some aspirin, and then the pizza was ready. Before I let them eat, I said, I'm happy to be with you. They just looked at me dumbfounded. Can we eat? Bessie asked. I said, I repeated that I'm happy to be with you. That's real nice, Roland said, and picked up the pizza slice and ate it in 3 bites, even though it was still pretty damn hot. After dinner, I washed the plates while the kids picked out a book for me to read to them. Can we skip bath time? Roland asked. And do we need to brush our teeth? Bessie asked. You kids were in the chlorinated waters this afternoon, I told them. You caught on fire, so it's probably good to get a shower. And you have to brush your teeth. Aw, man, Roland said, and I stood firm, and the kids seemed to respect me for this, or else were biding their time before they ran me over. I stood outside the bathroom while they took turns hopping in the shower. They were 10. I didn't know what the boundaries were at 10, but they seemed too old for me to be dealing with their naked bodies, unless, of course, it was fire-related. That was my plan, to let them control themselves until they couldn't control themselves. It's how I would have wanted to treat it if I were a demon child. I sat on the floor in between the kids' 2 beds, Bessie and Roland, all fresh in their pajamas, their hair with what a horror show, wet and slicked down into something tame. Bessie handed me a book, Penny Nichols in the Black Limp. What is this? I asked. The cover was red and faded, just a hard copy with the outlet of a girl's profile. I looked at the title again. What in the hell was a black imp? I checked the copyright, which was made from the 30s. Was it racist? Maybe a different book? Guys, there's a million down there. Maybe like Super Fudge or something. This kind of like Nancy Drew, but weirder, Bessie informed me. Have you read this already? I asked. Bessie nodded, but Roland said, I haven't. What's the black imp? I asked. It's a part of mystery, she told me. I scanned the opening pages, and the first line had a slightly descriptive monster pulling up to a house. One of the characters used the word chant. It's just this statue, she finally said, seeing my hesitation. It's this clay statue. It's not about Satan or anything. Fine, I said, whatever you want. So I read to them about a girl detective named Penelope Nicholas, who was weird enough that it was interesting. It was fun. I liked reading out loud. I realized I did voice, even though the kids didn't make any sign of appreciation. I read and read, my voice getting soft, and the kids got sleepy. After a while, it was time for bed. Good night, kiddos, I said, talking to Penny Nicholas. Where are you going? Roland asked. To my room, I said, confused. To my private room, for privacy. Can you sleep with us tonight? Roland asked. No, I said, I cannot do that. Why not? Bessie asked, suddenly invested. There's no room, I said. We can push the beds together, Bessie said, but I told her the beds didn't really work like that. I thought of sleeping in the crack between the beds, sinking down, and it frightened me, honestly. We'll sleep in your room, Bessie said. We looked in there. It's a huge bed. No, I said. Just for tonight, Roland said. I thought of them being shoved into this bozo house with me. Their kind of nanny, their mom, dead, their dad in linen suit. Madison, like the good witch in every fairy tale. I thought of them catching on fire in this room, all alone. Fine, I said, until we get settled. Come on. The kids shouted, and they ran into my bedroom, where they dove under the covers. I turned on the fan. It was 9 o'clock. I usually stayed up past midnight, reading magazines and eating whatever Mary had left over in the fridge. But this, I guess, was what Madison was paying me to do. Come on, I said, like Moses parting the seas. Move aside so I can get in there. They did, and I crawled into bed, and they didn't cuddle against me, but they kind of bunched up so they were almost touching me. Good night, I said, thinking maybe I could slide out of the bed after they had fallen asleep, and then I could do whatever I wanted downstairs. And then I thought of the entire day, Bessie biting my hand, filling into the pool, watching them catch on fire, watching them catch on fire again, waiting for them to maybe catch on fire again. I realized I touched the plate on my face where Bessie had scratched me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The children were so close, burning up all the available air. I kind of gasped a little, and Bessie asked, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Go to sleep." And then I just closed my eyes and tried to imagine a world where everything worked out. And then I was asleep, dead asleep, for maybe 10 minutes, and then I heard them talking. "Is she asleep?" Roland said. "I think so," Bessie said. I kept my breathing steady, my eyes closed. "What do you think?" Roland asked. "She's okay," Bessie said, "I guess." "What about Dad?" Roland asked. "What a jerk," Bessie said, just like Mom said. I kind of like it here," Roland said. There was a moment of silence, and then Bessie replied, "It might be okay for a little while." "She's nice," Roland said. "Maybe," Bessie said. "She's weird." "So what do we do?" he asked. "We just wait and see," Bessie said. "And if it's bad," Roland said, "like Gran and Pops, we'll just burn it all down," Bessie said. "Everything, everyone, we'll set it on fire." "Okay," Roland said. "Good night, Roland," Bessie said. "Good night, Bessie," Roland said. They settled into their positions for sleep, their bodies relaxing. It was so dark in the room I could hear them breathing. And then, maybe a minute later, Bessie said, "Good night, Lillian." I laid there in the dark, the kids next to me. "Good night, Bessie," I finally said. And then we were all asleep inside the house, our new home.